Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. After launching a series of missile tests, North Korea now threatens a missile strike on the US Pacific territory of Guam. Warning follows US President Donald Trump's remarks that the US will meet any aggression with fire and fury. Venezuela's president affirms new legislative body as all-powerful. In a lengthy address to the 545-member Constituent Assembly, Maduro lashes out at detractors, also calls for a face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump. Uhuru Kenyatta, re-elected as Kenya's president, defeats veteran opposition leader and long-time rival Raila Odinga in a tense contest. Election Commission declares that the 55-year-old businessman and son of the country's founding president had received enough votes to secure a second five-year term. And Australia, Japan and the United States urge Southeast Asian nations and China to ensure that South China Sea Code of Conduct will be legally binding. All three oppose coercive unilateral action in the region. Well, the war of words between North Korea and the US took a worrying turn on Wednesday when Pyongyang threatened to launch a missile strike on the US Pacific territory of Guam. This came just hours after US President Trump told the North that any threat to the US would be met with fire and fury.
Any plans to execute the preventive war devised by the US would be met with an all-out war, wiping out the strongholds of enemies, including the US mainland. That's a KRT newsreader quoting the Korean People's Party spokesperson. The party claims that Pyongyang was carefully examining a plan to strike Guam with a medium to long-range strategic ballistic rocket, Hwasong-12, to contain the US's major military bases on the Pacific territory, including the Andersen Air Force Base. It was a series of events on Tuesday that led to the North's sharp rise in rhetoric. First, a report in the Washington Post, citing US intelligence officials, suggested North Korea is developing nuclear weapons capable of hitting the US at a much faster rate than expected. Then, a Japanese government defense white paper also said the weapons program had advanced considerably and that North Korea possibly now had nuclear weapons. In response to that, US President Trump warned North Korea to stop threatening the US.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
Meanwhile, the governor of Guam pacified the people of the island and said that it was prepared for any eventuality.
I'm working with Homeland Security, the Rear Admiral, and the United States to ensure our safety. And I want to reassure the people of Guam that currently there is no threat to our island or the Marianas.
Also watching developments closely is South Korea. The government admitted that the North's latest military threat wasn't good for the relationship of the two Koreas.
Our military is fully prepared for all kinds of situations. The UNSC sanctions must come into effect instantly and at its most complete level.
Pyongyang, which has tested nuclear devices 5 times, launched 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles in July, claiming it now had the ability to hit the mainland US. On Tuesday, media reports in the US claimed the North had achieved its goal in making a nuclear warhead small enough to fit inside its missiles. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about the situation is KP NAYAR, strategic analyst. Thank you, Mr. NAYAR, for joining me on the program. You know, the situation between North Korea and the United States, is it as serious as it seems, or is it just rhetoric on both sides?
Well, I am going to be the devil's advocate and say that part of the blame for the current tensions in the Korean Peninsula rests with the Trump administration. On the face of it, it is very serious. But I blame the Trump administration in part because, see, the United States is a superpower, and a superpower has to behave with extreme caution and discretion. We saw that a couple of years ago, President Obama violated that discretion and drew a red line about the use of chemical weapons in Syria and said there would be consequences. Well, chemical weapons were used. We don't know who used it, but Obama was helpless. Obama couldn't do anything, you know. In the same way, when President Trump says something about North Korea, he should appear credible. You know, he should not use expressions like fire and fury, and today he said loaded and ready and all that, because see, we all know that Kim Jong-un is a madman, and he may believe this. He may believe what Trump is saying, although it may be bluster. And somebody like him could very well, out of fear, out of expectation that Trump actually means what he says, he may very well launch an attack, you know.
And that would be disastrous.
Yes, you know, 26 million people live in Seoul city, and that is only 35 miles from the demilitarized zone. I mean, United States has a huge number of soldiers there. 200,000 Americans live in South Korea. 400,000 live in Japan, you know. So anything done by somebody unpredictable as Kim Jong-un can have serious consequences. So my view is that the United States should, instead of, I mean, I don't say United States, I should say Trump administration, Donald Trump in particular, should say only what he means. And he should use other means instead of his usual Twitter diplomacy. And try and bring down the tension instead of ratcheting it up.
But does Donald Trump want to bring down the tension, considering the kind of heat that he's facing back home with all that's happening with Russia? You know, does this really play in favor of Trump?
Well, my view is that the Chinese are going to play a very critical role in this whole thing. And one hears that there are back-channel moves with China to diffuse the whole tension in the Korean Peninsula. And the Chinese have put their cards on the table. The Chinese have said, I mean, in unofficial statements and through them state media and all that, that if North Korea provokes something, if it launches a missile or if it attacks Guam or something, then Chinese will not intervene. Chinese will stay neutral. On the other hand, the Chinese position is that if President Trump provokes something and creates a situation where he is trying for regime change like he did, like the Americans did in Iraq or something, then the Chinese will make sure that they prevent it. So the Chinese position is very clear, and the Chinese will be backed on this by Russia. So the Chinese are going to play a very critical role in this, because it is in China's interest to ensure that there is no war there.
Sure, sure. All right, we'll have to leave to that. Mr. KP NAYAR, thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, moving on now, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has said that he wants a face-to-face meeting with US President Donald Trump. He told the newly elected Constituent Assembly that he wanted a personal conversation when the two leaders attended the UN General Assembly in New York next month. Trump recently imposed sanctions on Maduro, accusing him of undermining democracy. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro recognized the Socialist Party-dominated Constituent Assembly as the country's most powerful institution on Thursday in his appearance at the highly criticized legislative body that was inaugurated on the 4th of August.
This is a very special day. Today we have the National Constituent Assembly together, and I am here to recognize its plenipotentiary powers, sovereign, original and magnificent, to govern the destinies of the Republic. It is the first president to whom, as a head of state, I subordinate myself to the powers of his National Constituent Assembly.
He also called for a summit of heads of state of the ALBA trade bloc to respond to recent criticism from the Organization of American States.
I have officially called on Salvador Sanchez Serén, the President of El Salvador, with the support of the 14 countries of the ALBA, to convene in an urgent and immediate way a summit of heads of state and the government from Latin America and Caribbean to respond to the denouncement of Venezuela, to establish the truth of the case of Venezuela, to restore relations of dialogue of respect in the diversity of Latin America and the Caribbean.
The recent election of the 545-member assembly drew international condemnation for usurping the authority of Venezuela's opposition-controlled Congress. Critics have said that the election cast aside any remaining checks on Maduro's power. Maduro has said that the assembly is the country's only chance at securing peace and prosperity after 4 months of unrest and anti-government protests that have left more than 120 people dead. In an address that repeatedly brought assembly members to their feet in applause, Maduro called for a new governance framework for Venezuela aimed at perfecting the constitution of 1999. Maduro also said that he would challenge the US sanctions in an American court. The president received a succession of standing ovations from the Constituent Assembly, which is dominated by his supporters.
Yesterday we were awarded with sanctions for the only crime having organized elections. Where does the Emperor Trump think he rules? Is he the emperor of the world and do laws of the US deprive in all its territories, overseas or continental? Does he believe in a new sultan? The only king of kings is our Almighty. What does Donald Trump believe?
The opposition boycotted the July 30th election of the assembly and called for an early presidential vote that it was sure Maduro would lose for having presided over a severe economic recession that has been accompanied by shortages of food and medicine. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come, the results of the crucial polls in Kenya are out. Uhuru Kenyatta has been re-elected as president for a second 5-year term. On the other side, we'll look back at how the African nation voted earlier this week. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Art arisen from a multi-hued cultural canvas. Tradition and cultural fervor dating back centuries. And encircling them all, there's a magic that awes. Embrace your nation's brilliant human warmth. Watch Colours of India, Sundays at 9:30 p.m. on Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has been re-elected for a second term following Tuesday's election. Kenyatta, in office since 2013, took 54.3% of the votes ahead of his rival Raila Odinga with 44.7%. After the announcement, Kenyatta called for unity, but the opposition rejected the result even before they were declared, calling the process a charade. The election, however, has been endorsed by international observers. Let's now look back at how Kenyans voted earlier this week.
Long queues were seen outside polling stations across Kenya on Tuesday as millions cast their votes to elect their new president. From first-time voters to those bent with age, thousands descended upon polling stations early morning to cast their ballots under heavy security. Nearly 2 lakh police and security personnel, including wildlife rangers, were deployed amid fears of a communal violence following the announcement of results. The tightly contested clash pits President Uhuru Kenyatta against his longtime rival Raila Odinga. While Kenyatta, the son of Kenya's founding president, is seeking a second and final term in office, it's also Odinga's last bid for the presidency. Casting his ballot, the incumbent president said the loser of the election should concede defeat.
My competitors, as I have always said, in the event that they lose, let us accept the will of the people. I am willing myself to accept the will of the people, so to them too. Accept the will of the people, let us come together, let us pull this country together, and let us move forward as one nation, because that's the only way that we can achieve our joint vision for this country.
Opposition leader Raila Odinga, a 72-year-old former political prisoner and son of Kenya's first vice president, called on supporters to congregate at the Uhuru Park for the results.
Everybody to Uhuru Park, that is where we'll wait for the results.
For the first time in Kenya's history, prisoners were also allowed to cast their ballot.
It is the first time that Kenyan prisoners are voting, and this is a very good thing that we really appreciate. It was so smooth and very fast. We really appreciate for that.
It is a great day for Kenya, I can say, because we have been given the opportunity to come and exercise our democratic right of voting in the people we want.
Former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who is heading the U.S. Election Observer Mission in Kenya, said voters in the country were taking the election very seriously.
It's too early for us to draw any kinds of conclusions, so we're not. But obviously, given what's happened in the past and given the stakes for the future, this is a very, very important election, and clearly the citizens of Kenya are taking it very, very seriously.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama, whose father was born in Kenya, led a chorus of international calls on the eve of the vote for a peaceful election. Observers see the election as the last showdown of a dynastic rivalry between families of Kenyatta and Odinga that has lasted more than half a century. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
On the final day of the ASEAN meet in Manila, the participating countries discussed North Korea's nuclear missile program and other issues concerning regional security. Leaders urged the international community to isolate North Korea for its provocative actions. They also asked China and ASEAN to make the Code of Conduct on South China Sea legally binding. The code framework is an outline for China and ASEAN on a formal agreement which could start later this year.
Australia, Japan and the United States on Monday urged Southeast Asia and China to ensure that the South China Sea Code of Conduct that they have committed to draw up will be legally binding. In a joint statement at the end of a meeting of their foreign ministers on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, the three countries reiterated that they strongly opposed coercive unilateral actions in the South China Sea. They also urged claimants to refrain from land reclamation, construction of outposts and militarization of disputed features. Representatives of the three countries also urged the international community to pressure North Korea to abandon its provocative path and apply additional diplomatic and economic measures on Pyongyang over its missile tests.
Well, the best signal that North Korea could give us that they're prepared to talk would be to stop these missile launches. We've not had an extended period of time where they have not taken some type of provocative action by launching ballistic missiles. So I think that would be the first and strongest signal they could send to us, is just stop these missile launches. Obviously, we have other means of communication open to them to certainly hear from them if they have a desire to want to talk.
The ASEAN chair also conveyed regional security concerns to North Korea's foreign minister. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, lots more has unfurled around the world this week. Here's a look back at some other big news from around the globe in our segment Globe Watch.
Death toll from a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that struck a remote area in southwest China's Sichuan province has risen to 23. The quake has also left 493 others injured. The quake jolted Jiuzhaigou County, a popular tourist destination, at a depth of 20 kilometers. More than 2,000 aftershocks with a maximum magnitude of 4.8 have been observed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to the Chinese microblogging platform to express his condolences. Modi said that he was saddened by the loss of life and devastation caused, and added that the Indian people pray for the victims' families and hope those injured will recover swiftly. The UAE says that any escalation of tension between India and China on the Doklam standoff will be potentially disruptive for countries in the region. Both the sides should also try to resolve the issue amicably. UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Anwar Gargash, said that his country has been keeping an eye on the issue and hope that both great powers will find a way to resolve it. Hassan Rouhani was sworn in as the Iranian president for his second term last weekend in an open parliament. He vowed to continue constructive interaction with the international community. Rouhani vowed to use all means of power to serve the country, Iranian nation and the Islamic establishment. Later, Rouhani appointed 2 female vice presidents a day after coming under fire from reformers for nominating no women ministers. A car rammed into a group of soldiers in a Parisian suburb, injuring 6 of them before speeding off. Officials said the BMW car was parked in an alley before it accelerated onto the soldiers as they left their barracks to go on patrol duty. According to reports, 2 of the 6 soldiers were seriously injured. The search for the driver and the vehicle is underway. Defence Minister Florence Parly condemned the car ramming as a cowardly act, saying it did nothing to dent soldiers' determination to work for the security of the French people. In a landmark move, Qatar now allows nationals of 80 countries visa-free access, making it the most open country in the region to foreign visitors. According to state-owned Qatar Airways, nationals of these 80 countries will no longer need to apply for visa or pay for them on arrival. Instead, they will simply be able to show their passport at customs and enter the country.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed this week in sports action. There was to be no triumphant end to Usain Bolt's final individual race. The great Jamaican will retire after the IAAF World Championships in London, bringing the curtain down on an incomparable career. But in the 100 meters final over last weekend, he had to settle for bronze as the controversial American Justin Gatlin secured a surprise victory in his season's best 9.92 seconds. Fellow American Christian Coleman took silver, with 8-time Olympic champion Bolt still the reigning 100 meters and 200 meters world record holder in bronze, clocking 9.95 seconds. Captained by the Paris Saint-Germain striker Neymar, Brazil have knocked Germany off the top of the FIFA rankings released on Thursday. World champions Germany dropped to second despite winning the Confederations Cup last month after some rolling historical results were devalued. Lionel Messi's Argentina are in third and modest Switzerland, with a 100% record in World Cup qualifiers, are fourth, which is higher than they have been since 1994. Poland are at a historic high of fifth, having dropped just 2 points in their own qualifiers as European champions Portugal dropped to 2 places to fifth. A delightful goal by Isco proved the difference as Real Madrid survived a Manchester United fight back to win 2-1 and lift the UEFA Super Cup in the Macedonian capital of Skopje on Tuesday. Casemiro put the reigning European champions in front on 24 minutes on a steamy summer's night in the Balkans, and Isco doubled their lead 7 minutes into the second half after a 1-2 with Gareth Bale. Romelu Lukaku pulled one back just past the hour, marking his competitive debut for United with a goal and sparking a big improvement for the Premier League club in the final stages. Liverpool rejected a bid of €100 million from Barcelona for Brazil playmaker Philippe Coutinho. Barca's second bid for the 25-year-old, which was rejected immediately, comprised an initial €85 million plus €15 million in add-ons. Liverpool reiterated that Coutinho, who joined them from Inter Milan for £8.5 million in 2013, is not for sale. Barcelona sold Brazil forward Neymar to Paris Saint-Germain for a record transfer fee of £200 million last week. Coutinho, who scored 14 goals last term and spent 6 weeks out with an ankle injury, signed a new 5-year deal in January which did not include a release clause. The recently concluded ICC Women's World Cup in England saw record coverage, with over 180 million people estimated to have watched the prestigious quadrennial tournament. There was also an almost 300% increase in viewing hours in comparison to the last edition in 2013. The hosts England won the World Cup, defeating India in a thriller by 9 runs in the finals played at Lord's on July 23rd. There was significant growth in audiences in all territories, but particularly impressive was an 8-fold increase in viewing hours in South Africa and a huge increase in viewers in India, particularly in rural areas, since 2013. And finally, thousands of Pokemon Go players gathered in the Japanese port city of Yokohama on Wednesday to try their hand at catching rare Pokemon while watching dance shows featuring giant Pikachus. The festival, which is jointly organized by Yokohama City and the Pokemon Company, will feature a total of 15,000 Pikachus and will end on August 15th. More such events will be held in Japan in the lead-up to the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from the land of the rising sun. Until next time, this is Frank Pereira signing off.